given house in Cuba, if you wanted to have a pretty good guess at how that family has fared economically over the last 50 years, one way you could do it, and maybe a more successful way than just asking them how much money they have, would be to have a look at the goods that they've acquired. And not just in the kitchen, you could do it in other rooms of the house as well. But in any given house, you will see that people have managed to keep using goods, and especially with important and expensive goods like technologies and appliances that come from different periods in Cuban history. So you can still find American refrigerators, although fewer now than they previously were, but American refrigerators that had been in Cuba since before the revolution have been maintained very lovingly and at considerable expense because they're good refrigerators with a lot of capacity. You could also find Russian refrigerators and other Russian appliances, hair dryers, air conditioners, blenders, sewing machines that from the Soviet era people were acquiring through various schemes that were set up in the kind of high socialist period to allow people to have access to these important kinds of appliances. And many of those appliances are still in use today. And then the more recent and more common kinds of appliances and other objects that you can find are often Chinese made or perhaps from other parts of the world, but that have come in the post-Soviet period from the 1990s onwards. And how people have managed to acquire those goods is often an interesting story.
Ajá, última pregunta, ya, se acabó y después vamos a ver a la cocina. ¿Cuánto tiempo has vivido en esta casa?
¿Cuánto tiempo?
¿Has vivido en esta casa?
57 años. 57 años. Llegué aquí de 3 años y voy a cumplir 60.
¿Cuántos años usted lleva en esta casa?
Yo me mudé aquí en 1970.
Ajá.
1 de mayo de 1970 y estamos en el 2014. Hace 44 años.
Bastante tiempo.
Often people have had to save up for a very long time, or they have to depend on help from their migrant relatives abroad to send back the money to buy those appliances, because even something relatively small like a fan costs months worth of a local salary. And so something like a refrigerator is absolutely unaffordable, even for a Cuban on a professional income. So migrant remittances, sending money back to Cuba from overseas, is an extremely important part of the Cuban economy. Sometimes it's a part that's delicate to talk about, but you can see the material evidence of that by seeing that people have goods in their houses that they have bought with the support of their relatives abroad.
Entonces el refrigerador, por ejemplo,
No,
¿cómo lo conseguiste?
El refrigerador me lo regaló mi hermano.
Ajá.
Es un regalo, no lo compré.
Ajá. ¿Y cuándo es que él te lo regaló?
En el 2003. 2003, 2004, por ahí.
Kitchen appliances are especially interesting to me as well, because in 2006 there was a specific scheme that the Cuban government introduced where they replaced older appliances for new Chinese-produced appliances that were said to be more energy efficient, that generally relied more on electricity rather than on other forms of power. And so for me that was a really interesting example again of how the politics and economics of a whole country could be reflected in a single house or in a single kitchen, because in 2006 all of a sudden almost everybody in the whole country had the same kind of refrigerator, the same kind of rice cooker, the same kind of pressure cooker. And now, 8 years on from that period, all of these appliances are aging at a relatively similar pace. And one of the things I'm doing right now is talking to some of the participants in my research to see how those appliances are aging in their kitchen and what has changed over the last decade or so in terms of the technologies that they use to cook and to keep food cool.
Bueno, a mí en particular me ha ido bien porque como tengo una variedad de equipos de cocina, no he sometido a ninguno de ellos a una explotación diaria, grande, porque he podido variar. Pero por ejemplo la olla reina, que es algo muy bueno para la mujer porque realmente tiene un poder de cocción fuerte, los granos nuestros son generalmente duros, necesitan tiempo. La olla reina los ablanda siempre,
Sí.
ella los vence.
Sí, hasta los frijoles más
ella los
duritos.
vence, pero es una olla que tiene, como todas las cosas, vida limitada.
Sí.
Entonces, por ejemplo, yo que no le he dado un uso extraordinario, que no le he sometido a un uso intenso, ya empieza a fallar, ya he tenido que ponerle una junta nueva,
Sí.
ahora Tomasito vino y me le arregló el asa porque
Ya.
se desprende,
Es decir,
que supongo que haya mucha gente que la haya sometido
Sí.
a un trabajo más intenso,
Claro.
que se le han roto muchas ya, muchas.
¿tú crees que es justo entonces decir que es casi como una paradoja, ¿no? Pero bueno, una paradoja no, pero es como precisamente porque no dependes de esos equipos, te ha ido bien. O sea, precisamente porque tienes una variedad de otras cosas también para utilizar junto con esos equipos. O sea,
he podido alternar.
ajá, tienes
todos esos
otras
medios.
posibilidades y por esa razón hasta ahora te sirven esos equipos.
Perfecto, es verdad.
¿Y cuál fue el frío que usted tenía antes de
Un
eso?
impú que estaba malísimo.
Un
El
impú,
impú, el
estos
que
son
se
los cubanos.
hace, eso que se hacen en Santa Clara.
Sí, sí, pero dicen que
Que
estaban
son
bastante...
buenísimos,
ajá,
son
ajá.
buenísimos.
Sí, sí,
la
sí.
máquina estaba perfecta.
Sí, sí.
Pero no es lo mismo tener
No.
una cosa nueva.
Claro que no.
Todavía yo lo estoy pagando.
Sí, no, dicen que hay algunas personas que lo van a estar pagando toda la vida. Que lo que dice mi amigo que era trabajador social, que él dice no, que hasta toda la vida lo van a estar
yo
pagando.
hasta el 2016.
Ah, bueno, ya está al doblar.
Sí, sí, sí.
Ujú. Entonces,
más fácil.
hablando generalmente, ¿cómo le ha ido con los equipos adquiridos a través de esa política
A
del
mí
2006?
por lo menos me ha ido divinamente bien. Yo, por ejemplo, pagué todo eso, menos el frío.
Ya.
Yo trabajaba y entonces, cuando me dieron todo eso, ya mi esposo se había muerto,
Sí, hace rato,
pero
sí.
a través, hace 22 años.
Sí, sí.
Y entonces yo fui cogiendo el dinero porque te daban facilidades para pagarlo en la bodega.
Ajá.
Y entonces yo fui, iba pagando las cosas. Me dieron la olla que valía 127 pesos, la olla arrocera.
Sí.
La más cara fue la multipropósito, que fueron 350 pesos.
Cariño, pero al final es la cosa que más se usa.
Es la que más se usa. Porque tú puedes hacer en ella arroz, tú puedes hacer en ella vianda, tú puedes hacer carne, tú puedes hacer lo que tú desees y lo haces en un momento.
Sí, otra señora me dijo que las mujeres cubanas se han hecho una adicción a la
esa
reina.
soya. Sí, es verdad, porque lo hace todo enseguida.
You mentioned a second ago that American appliances were deemed reliable and quite big, and in terms of how much stuff you can put in them, I guess. What do Cubans think of, or how did they think about the Soviet-era appliances and the newer Chinese appliances?
So on the whole, people find Soviet-era appliances, Russian-made goods, to be very dependable and very robust. Not usually very beautiful, but very practical and enduring. Chinese goods have a reputation to be of lower quality, but are more accessible price-wise, and these days are often the main option available. So you don't usually have much choice at any given time about what kind of appliance you might want to buy. You just have to hope that there are some of that appliance available in the shops. And one of the things that's interesting to think about is how people enjoyed using all of these goods regardless of their political persuasion. So American refrigerators could be revered, but that's not to say that people are abandoning their communist leanings to love the United States. People could also have quite different political persuasions and not have been very fond of the Soviet era in Cuban history, but still appreciate the robustness of a Russian refrigerator. Cuba has a very heroic history at the national level. The Cuban Revolution and previous moments in Cuban history before that are full of rhetoric and speeches and sayings about how heroic the Cuban people are. But for a lot of people from the 1990s onwards especially, the main ways in which they've had to be heroic have been in this everyday battle to meet their needs in a context of economic crisis or economic transformation. And people talk about doing their shopping or acquiring their goods using language of struggle and heroism. So to talk about struggle, to use the verb luchar in Spanish, is actually the word that they use to talk about trying to acquire things or trying to fight hard to make sure that their family is provided for. It's often the kind of home front of a war that's not exactly Cuba against the United States, but is certainly the struggle of the Cuban system to survive in a very hostile environment. And whether or not people in their own houses agree with all aspects of the Cuban government, some people agree and some people don't, but everybody agrees that everyday life is a struggle and that one of the main struggles is the struggle of shopping. And that's literally the way that people talk about it.